So, why do we still need passwords and why do we still use them? More additional security methods are being introduced, but are they doing enough to enhance the security of the passwords? Passwords have their vulnerabilities, which often lead to catastrophic events such as data breaches. Okay, so looking at a brief history of the password, it was introduced to computing in 1960 by Fernando Corbato. He was amongst a group of researchers at MIT who all used a compatible time-sharing system which had a common mainframe and a single disk file. Passwords were used to keep the individual files private. This went on to become the go-to method for computer security, both in personal and corporate spheres, due to its simplicity, obviously with various security enhancements introduced over the years. The first password theft took place just 2 years later in 1962 by PhD candidate Alan Sher. Alan was he was only allowed to use 4 hours a week on the CTSS, but since the simulations he designed required more time than that, he printed out a file with all the passwords and began logging in as other users. Cryptographer Robert Morris Sr. introduced hashing for Unix systems in 1974. This was placing random characters on the password and never storing the actual password on the device. In 1979, Robert Morris and Ken Thompson coined the term SALT. Salting the password is adding characters to the password before hashing takes place. In 1997, the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, was created by 2 Belgian scientists, and it is still used today. Around the same time, CAPTCHA was introduced. Since then, we've adopted far more complex and secure ways of authenticating user sign-ins with passwords. It's common practice that one-way hashing is used to store passwords and to have minimum requirements. However, there's still a lot of challenges faced when it comes to passwords and password attacks. There's credential stuffing, where attacks are automated, where attackers use compromised credentials taken from previous data breaches to repeatedly try and sign in on other applications. Poor user behavior of reusing old passwords or common passwords usually leads to the success of these attacks. Then there's rainbow table attacks. A rainbow table is a table with the plain text password stored next to hashed passwords from common hashing algorithms that attackers will use to try and sign in. So although hashing does help enhance the security of the password, it doesn't prevent attacks. Then there's brute force attacks. These use trial and error with every combination of passwords possible. And although that's not very efficient, it does lead to success in a lot of cases. So layers and layers of security have been added to the password to reduce these risks: MFAs, magic links, OTPs, or biometrics. And these have helped to increase the security. But the risk is still very real. And even with the security enhancements, there are growing threats of cybersecurity. In fact, researchers recently discovered that there's over 1,200 phishing kits targeted at intercepting two-factor authentication codes. Taking a look at data breaches, these are situations where confidential and sensitive information is exposed to unauthorized personnel. This will occur due to weakness in the technological architecture or user behavior. And it's achieved in various ways, namely phishing, brute force methods, malware injections, denial of service attacks, and ransomware. With credentials remaining one of the most sought after pieces of information for hackers and compromised passwords being linked to third-party data breaches for years now, software needs to pivot to more secure forms of authentication. So a cool website I found is haveibeenpwned.com. And once you enter your email address, you can see which data breaches your email and credentials were attacked. And it also gives you some information on each breach, what was compromised, and a whole list of things. The website also has details on breaches in general, what they are, and also how to try and keep your credentials a bit more secure. So unfortunately, users typically will tend to value convenience over security. This can be seen about looking at the most common passwords of 2021, where there were 1234566, 123456789, and 12345. Even with the growing enhancements of security, authentication and password protection, data breaches are becoming more common and more severe. Adding more and more factors of authentication will lower the user experience and disincentivize people to use these applications and products. Issues with the password have been known for a very long time. This is from an article written in 2004, where Bill Gates talked about how it must be replaced. And while there have been many improvements since then, the security of passwords have been increased. Some of what he said back then does still hold up. So looking ahead, understanding the current growing risks of having passwords and the constant need to innovate in the cybersecurity sector, safer and more secure alternatives need to be turned to change the current trajectory. I'll be talking about two main examples that I thought were quite interesting for passwordless authentication, while there are quite a few more that exist out there. The first is FIDO Alliance, or Fast Identity Online. This is an open industry association started in 2013, and their stated mission is to develop and promote authentication standards, which help to reduce the world's over-reliance on passwords. The alliance consists of some big names in the tech industry, such as Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Intel, amongst many others. According to FIDO, passwords are the root cause of over 80% of data breaches. An average user will have over 90 online accounts, while 51% of passwords are reused, and 1/3 of online purchases are abandoned due to forgotten passwords. So how does FIDO work? During registration, so firstly, the FIDO protocols use standard public key cryptography techniques to provide stronger authentication than a normal password. During registration, on an online service, the user will choose an available FIDO authenticator that matches the online service's acceptance policy. The user will unlock the FIDO authenticator on their device using a method of their choice. This could be a biometric, a button on a second factor device, or a secure PIN. The user's device will create a new public and private key pairing, which is unique to the online application, the user account, and the local device. The public key is then sent to the online service associated with the user's account. The private key and the information about the local authentication method will never leave the local device. When a user wants to sign in, the online service will challenge the user to log in with a previously registered device that matches the service's acceptance policy. The user will unlock their FIDO authenticator using the exact same method as before. The device uses the user's account identifier provided by the service to select the correct key and sign the service's challenge. The client device sends the signed challenge back to the service, which verifies it using the stored public key and logs in the user. So taking a look at the specifications for how FIDO is built. Firstly, there's FIDO UAF. This supports a passwordless experience. The user carries a device with the FIDO UAF stack installed, which allows them to register their device online by selecting a local authentication mechanism, such as swiping a finger, looking at the camera, speaking into the mic, or entering a PIN. FIDO UAF protocol allows the services to select which mechanisms are presented to the user. Once registration is complete, the user will just need to repeat the local authentication mechanism, as mentioned before, whenever they need to authenticate. Then we have FIDO U2F. Sorry, there's a typo there, it's meant to say U2F. So this supports a second factor experience. So this will allow online services to augment the currently existing security. So when there currently is a username and password, this will allow for second factor experiences across a range of online applications. So now there is FIDO 2 or FIDO 2.0. This is combined an upgraded FIDO UAF and FIDO U2F. And it consists of W3C web authentication specification and the corresponding client to authenticator protocols, or CTAP, from the FIDO Alliance. It supports passwordless, second factor, and multi-factor user experiences with embedded or bound authenticators, such as biometrics or PINs, or external authenticators, such as FIDO security keys, which are similar to flash drives, mobile devices, or wearables. W3C web authentication defines a standard web API being built into browsers and platforms to enable support for FIDO authentication. CTAP2 allows the use of external authenticators on FIDO 2 enabled browsers and OSs over USB, NFC, or BLE. For a passwordless second factor or multi-factor authentication experience, and CTAP1, which is the new name for FIDO U2F, allows the use of existing FIDO U2F devices such as FIDO security keys for authentication on FIDO 2 enabled browsers and operating systems. So then another interesting one is the TrueID API. So this one I'm not going to go into too much detail since it seems relatively new. But basically the TrueID is an authentication API which uses a SIM card in a mobile phone to authenticate the user's identity. The SIM-based authentication promises to be the new phishing-resistant possession factor. SIM cards use the same highly secure cryptographic microchip technology that's built into every credit card. It's difficult to clone or tamper with, and since there's already a SIM in every phone, it doesn't cost the user any extra and it doesn't prove to be any more of a hassle. The combination of the mobile phone number with its associated SIM card identity is a silent authentication check and proves difficult to phish. TrueID takes advantage of the fact that mobile networks routinely perform silent checks that a user's SIM card matches their mobile number when they send messages or make phone calls, ensuring real-time authentication without requiring a login. It does not access the user's SIM card, but rather verifies the SIM card status directly with the mobile operator in real time. That's it.